Thank you, and thank you for the invite. Tax Tusen, is that right? That's the limit of my Norwegian now. Terje informs me he will translate any of the complex things, maybe in the bar afterwards. I'm very happy to be able to give an update on what we've been doing, and despite my lack of Norwegian, I get a general idea of what's going on. Luckily, through Eurogeo surveys and Marine Expert Group, we share a lot of ideas, and there's things certainly that I would say you're doing a lot better than us, particularly outreach, engagement with your stakeholders. And maybe we're concentrating a bit too much on hydrography and just getting the data out there. But anyway, you can make that decision. Some things I didn't include in my talk on the economics that I might just sort of give you some overview of now. The Irish marine sector is valued at about €3.4 billion from a study in 2007, with 2.4 billion in direct and indirect value added. It constitutes 1.2% of the GDP, which is the exact same as the percentage of GDP in Norway, interestingly, but only employs 1% of our workforce, as opposed to 6% of yours. The seafood sector, however, is only €719 million, with 11,000 jobs, and Ireland are only a seventh in the league table of aquaculture producers in the EU, where aquaculture has been valued in 2010 at 115 million. We believe there's huge potential to increase this, particularly in the deeper water, open water aquaculture. However, we do have the laxilus problem as well to deal with. I should apologise also that there aren't that many nice tourism photos like you had, or fish photos, but I'm a geologist and a manager, so it's mostly costs and tables. I won't bother giving the overview, I'll explain how it goes. The background to our deep water mapping was largely driven by territorial claim and UNCLOS project, the designation of your offshore territories. The red line here is the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. However, the dotted line outside that is what we call the Irish designated area, where we look to claim a far greater area based on extension of the continental shelf. In particular, outside of that again, we're looking to claim additional areas with additional square kilometres as outlined here. To support this, the first deep water mapping was carried out by our Petroleum Directorate, the equivalent of your NPD, who in '96 mapped over 200,000 square kilometres out on the edge of the continental shelf to define the shelf edge. Following on from that, the red area on this slide was mapped under the Irish National Seabed Survey managed by the Geological Survey, which mapped over 400,000 square kilometres geologically, geophysically and bathymetrically. And that left the blue area, which is all of the area really less than 200 metre water depth. Any waters over 200 metres in the Irish designated area, both what we within our EEZ and what we hope to claim, have all been mapped at this stage. And the resulting data set at the time in 2005, it was mapped between 1999 and 2005, was the largest civilian marine mapping programme worldwide. Like I said, all the Irish territory over 200 metres mapped. It was government funded completely. Over a 7-year period, cost almost €32 million. Begun with contract shipping, a lot of contract ships, Russian vessels for ground truthing, because they transit through. And then from when the Marine Institute started to have some research vessels available, we started to use them. But I stress it was geological, geophysical and bathymetric mapping. In terms of its success, I'll go through it in the end, but the two things it has led to is extension of territory and marine parks, if you like. Moving into the nearshore, we were dealing with far more stakeholders. I'm not going to go through this list, but there's everything from international legislation, directives we have to meet, like safety of life at sea, the Water Framework Directive, a lot of EU and international UNCLOS water SOLAT. Areas like transport, when you come into the shallow water, that's where ships run aground. Our biggest single stakeholder, if you like, in terms of importance, is the Hydrographic Office. Interestingly, the UK Hydrographic Office provide the charts for Irish waters. We work with them and we provide data to their top standard. We work very closely with them. The environment, obviously, we work with in terms of designating areas, protecting areas. Heritage, shipwrecks, sunken heritage is a huge area, a huge tourism area, and most of the public interest for the project is not from what we do in terms of safety or environment. It's actually when we find a shipwreck or when we locate a shipwreck. The newspapers, the media, the politicians, everybody's interested in the human stories, and that's another thing to contend with in the shallow water. The fisheries I don't need to go into. Again, it's a question of trying to get them to use the data, which is the challenge. The knowledge economy is the broad word we use for everything to do with research, smart applications to the data, and resource management, from oil investigations to aggregates to spawning grounds to wind and wave energy sites, which is now our squeaky wheel, if you like. The people who are screaming most for the data in Ireland are people who want to select and designate new sites for wave energy and for offshore wind. These are the people who are beating down our door, asking us where to map. The marine leisure and the diving area, obviously. So apology for the poor diagram there, but basically we had a big stakeholder exercise in 2005. We brought everybody in over a series of meetings, consulted with them to come up with the plan for how we would map the shallow water areas. We came up with an acronym, INFOMAR. If you want government money, you always need an acronym. And I have to write down what it stands for. Information on the marine sounds good, but it has to be more complicated. And basically, the feasibility study came up with the idea of mapping the areas, but doing the priority areas first. So those little boxes there show the priority areas. And this was literally like arm wrestling. Map my bay for aquaculture, no, map my bay for transport, map my bay for wave energy. So most of the bays were included, most of the important bays, and these broad priority areas. And that's when I got involved. I got involved in 2006 and from the shallow water program. The problem was they gave us the 26 bays. They didn't give them 1 to 26. So there was no internal priority. And that's where the fighting starts, you know. In terms of the program, the idea was not just to acquire the data, but also to make sure we looked at how the data can be used. So this idea of data exchange and integration and value-added exploitation, that people are actually making something of the data. Too many big projects, big government projects, geological survey projects acquire the data. The geologists love it, the people who acquire it love it, but maybe the people out there who should be using it aren't using it, and it sits on a shelf. We couldn't afford for this to sit on a shelf. It's too expensive. Like I said, it was scoped as a 20-year program, which was quite ambitious, but back in 2006, when we had lots of money in Ireland, we could afford to be ambitious. So for the first 10 years, the priority base, and for the next 10 years, the remaining territory. The estimate at the time was 84 million euro to complete, which on yesterday's exchange rate is about 640 million kroner, which maybe isn't too expensive. Data acquisition, it's the same as your Mariano project. The main thing is multi-beam, single beam from vessels, from shallow water vessels. Also airborne LiDAR works well in some areas in Ireland, and obviously all the ground truthing there, towed video ROV sampling isn't included, side scan sonar where there are wrecks, shallow seismic sparker where we can in the bays after they've been mapped. In terms of the platforms we use, these are the 2 Marine Institute research vessels. The Celtic Explorer, which we don't really use so much, it's a bigger vessel, it's like your Mariano vessels, but now we're in the inshore, we're only really using it around 20 days a year to ground truth the older INSS survey areas and for research cruises which we support. So mostly we're using the Celtic Voyager, the smaller vessel on the right, and we have it for about 100 days a year. So quite extensive amount of work. It works 24 hours a day, 2 weeks in 2-week slots, so we get a lot of work done depending on the weather. And this image on the very top shows you just the effort. You understand this, that out in the deep water, when you're out in the deep water, you're in 4 kilometers of water, you have 16 kilometers swat width up and down, you can paint in the seabed, it's great. You come into a little bay, you're in a little very far corner in a little small boat, it'll break your heart. You're going up and down and up and down and up, and you can't see anything. So these are the vessels we run in the geological survey that we're using now. Extensively. The Curie is a vessel we got built especially for the project. I know you're talking about getting a cat. This is a dedicated aluminium cat with all of the smart equipment bolted into the center on a retractable pod, so we can go out, we can map. Then if the weather gets bad, we pull up the equipment, we can get out of there. The west coast of Ireland, a bit like your west coast here, can be very nasty, and you don't always have safe places to run to. We've only got one fjord, so it's too far away, so you have to be able to move around quite quickly. And we just use daylight hours. And we bought a rib just to support it, but the geologists and the techies, when they got bored, decided they'd put a mapping system on it. So we've got a SWAT system on the rib, and it gets even shallower. And we use these for about half the year, from April through to the end of September into October. And because of weather, and we end up working about 50% of that time. But we try to work for a full 6 months, all of the daylight hours. I won't go through the detail of the equipment we have, but they're the workhorses of the project. Like I said, we did LiDAR. This is the 10X LADS plane. It can be a very useful tool, and obviously in Norway it can be very useful where you've got good clear waters. And they've flown, this is the plane that has flown after Ireland in Europe. Norway is the next area that's flown most of this, because I know your hydrographic office we used to buddy up. When we would get them on contract, we would share mobilization cost. Just to get this plane in the air and get the survey started costs about €250,000. So it's expensive, but then you acquire data very quickly. Unfortunately for us, it only works in about 1/4 of our coastline because of turbidity issues. So we've done as much of the priority bays by LiDAR as we can. In terms of the output, our standard data is a shaded relief map, just showing you what the seabed is. Obviously from that you can produce all these nice digital products. This is a picture of an area from Fledermaus software with a trough on the southwest coast that hadn't been seen. And the map in the corner there shows the areas that are coloured in are what we have completed. So from the INSS, we don't seem to have done a whole lot, but we're more than halfway through these priority bays. As well as shaded relief and digital products, the standard thing is a backscatter map. Just, you know how this works, the amount of energy reflected back from the multibeam. And this is a proxy for hardness and a proxy for sediment. We take it one step forward in that using the Caris software and then QTC, we produce a classification. So sand, mud, gravel, rock, mixed sediment. And this really, for our environmental side, the biological side, is our physical habitat map. So we produce this as the physical habitat map. Then the Department of the Environment then decide what they want to do, where they want to dive, where they want to sample, but they do that themselves outside of the program. When we tried to include it in the program, it was a mess, because from the geological point of view, we could do regular sampling, but with the biological side, we would have to deploy separate vessels, different vessels every time. So this is what we produce, and then we produce this obviously all digitally. The full range of products is listed there. It includes things like Fledermaus DTMs that particularly the diving community like, where they can go in and look at their shipwreck and turn it upside down. And Google Earth Maps, because the software is there, it's free, we can output it, and then the man in the street, the local people can do it. What isn't listed there is OLEX grids. We put out OLEX grids and the matching applications. Like I said, a shipwreck, shipwrecks, marine heritage, marine leisure, this is in an area that we didn't probably appreciate how much interest there would be in this. The fishermen don't want to catch their gear on shipwrecks. The anglers want to fish on them. The divers want to dive them. The tourism companies want to promote them. So we produce simple little shipwreck booklets, and the survey itself has mapped over 246 wrecks, 71 new discoveries in the deep water, and so far in the shallow, we've produced 16 of these wreck sheets from about 50 wrecks we've mapped. A lot of the Second World War U-boats, Operation Deadlight, were actually dumped off the northwest. It's a whole other talk, but there's huge interest in it. From a research point of view, 10% of our budget is used to fund research. So we put money straight back into the research community, but it's added value applied research. It's not necessarily blue sky university research. We fund up to about 15 projects per annum, although we just announced 23 projects we're funding now this year. And 1/3 of those came from industry, small, medium enterprise, people working on automated systems for data acquisition, fishermen working on applications. So with industry to try and get the data being used and the data being out there. We also have some researchers on the project team, which I should have said is about 20 people, 10 in the Geological Survey, 10 in the Marine Institute, less than half permanent staff, little more than half contract staff, young, enthusiastic contract staff who do most of the work. One of the critical differences, I suppose, and something I'm almost have a religious fervour about, is all of our data is available free. Open, free to everybody in the world to do whatever they want with it. We don't believe in putting barriers in the way of the data. Too many times people say the licensing is preventing us from doing what we want to do. This has been proven with Landsat in the US. They put licenses on their data, they increased the price of it, the use went down. When they realized people weren't using it, they made it free, and it was too late. The use never came back up to what it was. We changed our policy in 2007, and now all of our geological survey digital data is available free on the web. We've 2,500 registered download users, and people have downloaded terabytes of data. We have 30 terabytes of data. Almost that amount has been sucked down. If it's too much to take down over the web, send us a hard disk. We'll put it on the hard disk. People can, the same way as you with Mariano, we have web mapping sites, so you can go in, you can see where we've worked, you can zoom into your area of interest and select your data, download it, what format, you can upload your data. It's all standard GIS things, including the in Google Earth format. And when you've selected your area of interest, you can be passed to a website to download it. And it just allows you to put in your area of interest, what do you want, what data is available within that area. It gives you some metadata about it, so you know, is this the type of data you're looking for? Just asks you, what do you want to do? Do you want to save it? Gives a license agreement, like everyone just goes, yes, 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 but they tell us what they're doing with the data, which is important. And then that's it. They send you an email to where you can download your zipped file. It works very simple. Now that's fine, but is it worth it is the key question. We've spent a lot of money on this. The seabed survey, the deep water survey cost 32 million, 245 million kroner. So far in INFOMAR, we've spent 176 million kroner. Total 420 million kroner has been spent on this. Just interestingly, for the same amount of money, which is 55 million euro, what could we have got? We could have built 5 secondary schools. That's my son's secondary school, nice school, cost 10 million. We could have put 2.5 kilometers of motorway, Dublin to the airport, not all the way to the airport, but most of the way. Our most expensive infrastructural project in Ireland is the Dublin Port Tunnel to relieve traffic. The actual boring machine that cost about 25 million, so we could have bought 2 of those. Or for the price of the actual tunnel, which cost 804 million euro, we could have put 280 meters of tunnel together, which isn't quite a lot. The Marine Institute, who are our partners on the project, just got a new building. We could have got a new building instead of doing the mapping. Some people would have preferred that, the guys who don't work in the Marine Programme. Or we could have bought 2 new Celtic Explorers, but then we wouldn't have done the mapping, so it's chicken and an egg. This is a back of the envelope, and it's kind of funny, but we actually went out under government rules. If you're going to spend more than 50 million euro under Irish government rules, you have to get a cost-benefit analysis done. Probably now this will apply if you want to spend more than 50 euro, but anyway, that's another talk. So we got PricewaterhouseCoopers, internationally recognized, to come in and look at it, to look at the project, and there's a formula for doing it. The first thing is, why should government pay for this? It's a logical question. And there's a concept called market failure. No private sector operator would do this kind of mapping. They will do a site investigation. They will map an aquaculture site. They're not going to map the entire coast because they're not going to be able to sell the data. So it's not going to be worthwhile. So only the government can do this, only governmental organizations. You have to comply with national and international law. The only way you can do it properly is by having the data. There's a marine resource information requirement. If you're going to manage the environment, get the economic and social perspective right, you have to have it. This is your Koenskat. You have to have your knowledge. Research and contribution to the knowledge economy. Overall, you're improving the research people are doing, not just the technical capacity to do the seabed mapping. You can buy that. But to actually really use the data, to integrate the data, to make it see where it fits in. As part of the project, they looked at the different options. The first one is to stop, which is the Department of Finance preferred option, stop spending money. The next one is just do the priority areas. Third one is do it all, but do it really quickly, which is what we preferred. Let's get it finished. Let's get it finished and out of the way before everyone retires and forgets all about it. Or the last one was to continue the way we were continuing, doing the strategy in full phased, and that's what they decided to do. So in terms of the costs, you look at the data acquisition costs. Obviously, if you stop, you don't have any costs. Going to the end, it's estimated it's going to cost us 60 million, these are in thousands, 60 million euro to acquire the data, almost 4 million just to manage the data. Don't forget this. People say IT, IT solutions. IT solutions cost money. So this is almost 10% of the cost of the project is just the data management. And then inflation. The longer they run the project, the worse inflation is. So 30 million euros just going to get blown on inflation. So maybe it'll cost 93 million. But then, what are the benefits? And this study is on the web. You can download it in detail and get it. But they looked at across the different sectors of where the benefits were. The commercial resource benefits, the sectors you've been talking about. But you've been talking about fishing and aquaculture and biodiversity. And maybe a little about energy, aggregates, tourism and leisure. Don't forget all of the users. And then the knowledge economy. One of the things we've been able to do is using our data, we've been able to leverage huge amounts of funding from other projects. The university in Galway is one of the leading marine research centres now. We're building a new research centre in Cork looking at marine energy. And one of the reasons they can win projects is they walk in and say, our government has spent 55 million on seabed mapping. We have a data set like this. What do you have? The legislative requirements, we're now meeting these, and the environmental benefits, they didn't quantify and say the cost of these, but they were referred to. In short, when you look at the estimated value, then they put a cost on these. Like the Georges Bank study earlier, which is reproduced in this, they said, well, if we can improve aquaculture by 1% or 5%, what's the sector worth? How much better will it be? And all the money adds up. So in the end, the return from this project, from this study, was that it's going to be something between 4 and 6 times the cost of investing it. And this is based on not charging for the data, don't forget. This is based on the return to Ireland and to the broader area from making the data available. So based on this study, we got the continuation to carry on from 8 to 2013. And next year I go back, we'll do a new study this year and go back again. One of the questions is, but how are we actually doing? And this is something we'll review this year. Fishing has been difficult to engage with. Most of you who deal with the fishing industry, they don't like technology so much, or they're fixed on it. But interestingly, OLEX, the Norwegian software, is really helping us here. A lot of the other software, it's very difficult to put our data into it. You can't get these guys to use GIS. So we're now trading OLEX data. They give us their little bit of OLEX data. We give them a massive amount of OLEX data. And that's helping now, and it's getting better. Aggregates economically isn't doing well because our construction industry has collapsed. Renewables is really good. We're under huge pressure for wave and wind energy, and deep aquaculture is one of the new things. The knowledge economy is doing very well. We've got over 200 projects using the data. We're involved in every European marine project. Either ourselves or the Marine Institute are the go-to partners if you have anything in Ireland. And the smart economy is growing. Patents, 3D visualization, really clever stuff that people like, but actually including this year someone developing a Farmville-style game, manage your fishery resources from Facebook, believe it or not. But they're going to use real data and real incidents and use our data. And the legislative stuff is doing very well. Like I said, in the words of L'Oreal, we think we're worth it. One of the good things as well is we have been as successful as a country in expanding the national territory. This Zone B, Porcupine Abyssal Plain, is an extra 56,000, a bit like the way you're extending your Barents Sea. So this has been granted now, and this is kind of impresses the politicians. And then they say, what can we do with it? It's at 4 kilometres water depth. We say, don't be so negative. Okay. What I don't show there is we have 4 marine protected areas we now have established based on our data, and that's going to be expanded based on further use of the data, mostly protecting deep cold water corals. Finally, we've obviously still a lot to do. We have to fill in the map. But interestingly, what's just happened is our government have come up with a new plan on an integrated marine plan. This was launched last Tuesday by our Fisheries Minister and contains a forward by our Prime Minister. They've listed it as one of the key things they're going to do, this new government that have come in when everything is so bad. They're going to sort out the marine area. They list all the good things they can do, and in the support of it they have 3 other documents. One of them is about the things we need to sort out marine spatial planning. It's called Key Enablers. Marine mapping is listed as a key enabler. It's something we have to have if we're going to do it right. So that's listed in there. And tomorrow, the head of the EC Commission is in Ireland talking about the importance of EU funding in the area of the marine. Tomorrow in Brussels, a meeting myself and Terry should both probably be at. The EC Commission are talking about the importance of seabed mapping and what they can do. So this what you're hoping to embark on, people understand how critical it is. Very quickly, if you look at the costs, coming back to the money again, the actual deep water mapping, doing a simple exercise, square kilometres divided by cost. It costs us €74 per square kilometre to map the deep water. It's costing us about 10 times that to map the shallow area. But the impact of the deep water mapping was good in certain areas, like I mentioned, deep sea fishing. I don't really think they use it that much a bit. Petroleum research, UNCLOS. With the shallow water mapping, the impact and visibility is way more than 10 times. You're pulled up in a port, your politician visits you, the local authority are aware you exist, you're on the local radio, people are giving you their data, they're trying to find out what you're doing, and it just raises the profile, gets people involved. So the coastal programme, in short, is harder work and it's more expensive, but it's greater impact, both from a political point of view and stakeholder, and it's greater reward. And it's worth noting that at the moment there are new programmes launched in the UK, the MARIMAP programme involving 3 of their agencies, including the British Geological Survey. France has their littoral project. Last week they announced a 10,000 square kilometre LiDAR programme that Fugro won, a massive contract. The Spanish are doing it province by province, but they've been investing in this for years because they're not stupid. They know about the value from the fishing point of view. That's all I'm going to say. We have our conference, and you're all welcome to come to that, and all the talks will be in English. But thank you very much for listening, and good luck with your programme.